The Zed Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for listening. This is Fream here with a solo spoiler cast for the game Inside. So this is going to be your warning. I will be talking about all the hidden and plot details nestled within this game. I initially stated I wanted to have this podcast section kind of with a larger group, but in challenges with coordinating with other people all over the world and the amount of time that has lapsed between when the game was released to now, I kind of felt like that window had passed. That is, of course, until I finally caught up with all of the spoiler casts on all of the other podcasts I listened to, and each one of them made me super frustrated. Like, I think I heard 5 different takes on this game, and every one of them I was like, well, wait, why am I so frustrated? And it's like, I think I feel like everybody else is wrong, and they just don't get it. Well, ultimately, that's kind of the beauty of the game, though, is I myself might be perfectly wrong in my assessment, and I'll admit there's some details I don't have supporting evidence for, but in hearing others' thoughts, I just couldn't not say my piece. So, let me start by saying my emotional roller coaster in playing the game went like this. Excitement builds, confusion. More excitement? Wait, what's behind that window? Whoa, what is that thing? Wait a minute, what just happened? Oh, okay, let's get out of here. Excitement building, rolling down the hill, freedom! Ah, credits. Wait, what's going on? Confusion and anticipation set in. End credits. Wait, what? That's it? That's the end? Did I enjoy that? Okay, secret ending time. There you go. Anyway, that's that's how I felt about the entire game. Simplified, right? But that was the emotional roller coaster I went through. Crazy ups and downs, and one of the beauties of the game and how it is just so cyclical like that. You think you figured it out, and it changes. You think you figured it out, and it changes. So with that being said, I totally understand everybody's criticism of the ending. It's weird, and it's a bit of a downer. Certainly on first blush, okay? But after I let it stew for a little bit and marinate, I became very engrossed and excited about the ideas that were hidden within. I liken this game to like a famous painting, like the Mona Lisa, which I think we can argue is a masterpiece of artistry, right? Leonardo da Vinci created a beautifully detailed and stunning portrait of a woman with this coy, slight smirking smile. Now, there's nothing revolutionary about the portrait in general. I mean, it's beautiful, right? But people have long discussed what is the deal with that smile, right? From that, born all these theories and sparks of debate, and thus the discussion lives on well beyond the lives of the painter and the subject. If Leonardo da Vinci or his muse flat out told us what the deal was, well, it'd be interesting, but ultimately it would be a piece of historical fact. And that removes the facets of opinion and questioning and the open-ended discussion that you can have about it, right? So, the makers at Playdead have done this with both of their titles so far, Limbo and Inside. Now, they don't want to come clean, and the closest we've got is that they've said there is a theory on Limbo that is close to the true meaning, and that bothers them, right? It bothers them that the two of the prevailing theories in Limbo, which are closely related to each other, that one of them is correct, or at least mostly correct. Now, if you haven't read that Kotaku Limbo ending breakdown that I talked about, I put it in the show notes before, but if you've played Limbo and haven't seen that, do yourself a favor and go read it. After, of course, playing the game. You want to play Limbo first, then go read that. It's super interesting, and it really makes you think about what you just played. Fascinating. Super dark, but fascinating. But this isn't a Limbo spoiler cast. No, this is an Inside spoiler cast. But what I'm getting to is that Playdead wanted to make this story more obtuse and confusing so that more emergent stories and theories would come to light. So, I will preface this by saying I don't have the answers. I'm using popular internet theories with my own little thoughts and tweaks and observations. That being said, I do want to give a lot of credit to Max Derrat for his YouTube video that I think best represents my personal feelings on the game, and it provided a great narration and visual display to support it. You can find a link in the show notes again. I think I put them in the original time we talked about it, but with this, it'll also be there as well. So go ahead and give him a hit on his YouTube page. So before I get deep into the story, I do want to point out, and which has been on so many shows and reviews, but the animations in this game are superb. Every single detail, every movement is so fluid and cohesive. Like all the little nuance and the subtle movements that are captured that goes so far into pulling you into the story. The art style and the integration of the foreground and background to set the stage for the game, and you can just dissolve into it and become fully immersed. The final thing I'll mention is that I loved how the game kept challenging my thoughts like every 15 to 20 minutes, right? That cycle persisted throughout the entire experience, really. Right? It started with my first thought, escape, right? Boy in the woods, escape. Well, then it became clear that now you're looking for something, right? Around the farmhouse time, you're like, no, he's not as panicked now. He's looking for something. Well, then it was breaking into that big walled city factory stronghold thing. Oh, I get it. We're getting inside. Oh, okay. And then it was like, well, we can't just walk through the front door, so let's go deep underground into the water. And then, along with all those things, it was like, well, what's with this lab? And what's with this? And the objectives kept changing, and the story kept changing. And you kept asking yourself, what am I seeing here? What is going on here? And all of that culminates in the very end sequence, which can only, at first, be described as WTF. And, of course, it comes full circle, and you escape. So let's back up. And again, I preface this by saying that these are my opinions, and you are free to think and consider your own alternatives. But I will present my take on it. So the setting is clearly an Orwellian dystopia, right? And whether Big Brother is a government entity or some private corporation, totally irrelevant from my perspective. It doesn't matter, but you've got Big Brother. I'm going to consider them the facility, right? Suffice it to say, the society outside of the walls has fallen into disarray. And the centerpiece of this landscape is this monstrous facility. The facility is clearly working on mind control capabilities and genetic engineering. You can see that through the headsets. You can see that through their, the little drone program that they've got going on. And the end result you get is this hive mind meatball you find at the end of the game. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The game opens in the woods, and there's already a search underway for the boy, right? He slides down, and the woods are filled with these metal canisters that you see later when you're inside the building. They have drones in them, right? You have to, when you collect them to do the elevator puzzle, there are drones inside of those things, right? So I think, and this is kind of where I detach from a lot of popular opinions, I believe these drone things are based on fungus, mushrooms. I believe that the lab entity, right, the facility, was growing these humanoid mushrooms for like semi-sentient and inherently controllable labor force. Why do I think they're fungus? Well, as pointed out in the YouTube video, those canisters are only lit up when they have a drone inside, and the lights only appear where there's greenery. So the woods out in the forest or the underwater greenhouse. Now, that doesn't inherently lend itself to fungus, but I believe it stems from semi-plant-based organisms. And then what clinches it for me is the notion of the hive mind. Those of you familiar with fungus in real life may know that they have this far-reaching interconnected network below the surface, and that any mushroom that pops out is actually, like in one spot, can be genetically identical to one of those found much, much further away. I mean, there's this huge one up in the northwest, up in Seattle, that is hundreds of square feet in size. One of the largest one of the largest organisms on the planet. Also, mushrooms feed on decay, and so they could gain all the nutrients they need from the waste and death surrounding the facility, as well as the world as like a general part of their whole ecosystem. So, there's less supporting evidence for that theory, but that's what I'm sticking with. So take that aside. Let's get back to the game. So the facility sends out these trucks into the woods to harvest these drones. And when they notice one of these has toppled over and whatever was inside had escaped, I personally believe that was the boy. He escaped from the pod, ran away, found some clothes to quote-unquote hide, but ultimately was called back by the hive mind to help rescue it from its imprisonment in that little viewing bubble. So the boy begins his journey back into the facility with guards already on high alert, right? They're looking for him because he's escaped and he's being called to pulled back in. That's why the guards have their flashlights. They're looking around. They have a truck full of these drones. They're out harvesting, and they're like, hey, that one tipped over, and it's open. Where the hell did the thing go? Let's find it. So that's why they're chasing you down. So, side note here, the chase sequences early in the game are timed so beautifully, and the tension that builds when you're being chased and hunted is just amazing. You just seem to always just make it, right? You're just out of reach of the dog's mouth, or you're just out of reach of the flashlight or the guy or whatever. Love that. Anyway, so the boy finds himself on a pig farm now, outside of the facility. With all the dilapidated buildings and buried machinery strewn about, the pig farm is where I believe the mind control experiments began, using pigs as human analogs. They share a lot of the same physiological traits. Now, there are some theories regarding the crossover between Limbo's glowing brainworms. Maybe. People cite that that glowing fragment that you see when you pull the tail off the pig and then it becomes docile. I like that idea, although I don't personally need the worlds to be shared like others suggest, so I kind of leave it as it is. And also, I don't really... I didn't recall it on my playthrough, but as I went back and looked through the video, I did see it when he pulls like some sort of brainworm off the rear end of the... I thought it was the pig's tail, but he very clearly still has a tail. So you pull the mind control worm off, maybe, but maybe they've found a way to harness that brainworm. Fine, but it seems like it's just a literary piece. I don't necessarily think that that's links the two games together like they want this to be, like they want the little boy to be the same little boy in Limbo. I don't buy that. But that could be their mind control tech. Suffice it to say, the boy finally makes it to the facility and he starts creeping inside. Now, one of the most telling sequences here is the performance line, for lack of a better term, right? This line of quote-unquote people performing for the onlookers, it's essentially a showcase to the families that visit. Look how we control these things. Pretty cool, right, little Jimmy? Should we take one home? You've got these like rich entitled people can kind of pick the best of the crop, and they've got this little personal attendant, mushroom monkey man running around. Essentially, it's like a quality control line to ensure that like the best quote unquote product is making it out the door into the shipping containers. And those that don't make the cut get sent into like menial jobs such as excavating the mines and tunnels beneath the facility, which is ultimately where we end up going. But let's not get too far ahead. Okay. After getting past the conga line and doing your little dance and stuff and seeing all the weird, people who are watching, you delve into the subway tunnels below this facility, and that's where you hijack that submersible. This sends us into this wondrous underwater facility that's complete disarray. I mean, the thing's a disaster. And something happened here, and whether it was caused by an accident, it was man-made, or a natural disaster is unclear. While it is possible that it was a natural disaster, like melting of the ice caps or something, I believe the root cause to be a little more sinister. One popular theory is that the facility was flooded in order to keep that terrifying little girl and all the other failed experiments that were there left deep in the belly of the research facility. My theory, a little different, that the flood was caused by something else, which I'll get to later. Now let me say, before I move on, let me point out how absolutely terrifying those underwater girls are, or is. It's just haunting. And the fluid animations of her hair, just outstanding. I mean, it's like The Ring, right? I mean, it's just totally creepy. And for the record, I do believe there is only one that shows up, and it's in multiple locations. Not many throughout. I think it's just one creepy little swimming naked girl in the game. So anyway, after that section, you end up in these underground caverns. Clearly some kind of mining operation, right? You've got the drones with the hard hats and everything. Down here, you find these worker drones, and ultimately score yourself a headset that allows you to control them. This section also supports my fungus theory, because these creatures are much more durable than our little boy. They are completely unfazed by falling off ledges and plummeting down the elevator shaft. And so, like, were these, could they have created these drones with, like, less rigid bone structures? So they're a little more durable for underground work, right? They can fall down a mine shaft and not get killed. Maybe. Again, not critical to the story, but it fits with my own little personal worldview. The next piece of the story I'm a little shakier on, and it's that concussive blast under the facility. They're rhythmic and persistent. And so it's definitely not some sort of an attack or bombardment from an outside force. But with all the supporting facilities around there, I feel like it's either part of concussive weaponry tests or creating concussive-resistant building tests, right? Because you have that room you walk into, and there's these crash test dummies with protective walls all around, and then you hit the switch and raise them, and then all of the concussive blasts just wreck the dummies that are around you. And so whether this is to, like, understand the devastation for an attack, like, of you causing the attack on someone else, or building structures that could withstand an attack is kind of unclear. I'm not quite sure, but that I haven't quite figured it out. If you have any theories out there, I'd love to hear them, by the way. Ultimately, you end up back into a flooded facility, although this secondary facility seems in better shape than the first section we explored. I'll get to that later. So you continue deeper into the facility and are continued to be harassed by that naked swimming girl, only to culminate in your death, which was shocking, right? You go to grab that chain or that piece, and you're thinking, oh, I'm just playing for fun. You fall, and that thing grabs you and drags you to your death. And that girl just keeps pulling you down, but wait a minute. You don't die. Well, maybe you kind of die, but it doesn't reset you. And she cools you down, and finally, you see that she's trying to get you plugged into the system, and ultimately gives you the benefits that the hive mind that you've been lacking. The ability to mind control without aid and to breathe underwater. Okay? So, ultimately now you're in the underwater section of this older research facility. And I say it's older because when you get to the bottom, you see VHS tapes strewn around the floor. You got some long forgotten office areas. But when we venture into one part that I'm having a little trouble explaining, okay, it's the area with the upside-down tethered bodies. I believe this is part of the battery that helps the hive mind. Like, this collection of bodies suspended upside down brings, they act as nodal points to strengthen the hive's signal. Perhaps being held upside down, like, brings blood down to the brain for better function. And then the suspension in water makes sense in terms of, like, veal, right? You keep the organisms atrophied, so all the nutrients go into powering the brain, and that the rest of the body can just kind of wither and atrophy. Maybe. Or perhaps, like, the water is nutrient rich, and the creatures are actually gaining sustenance from osmosis. Or they could even be acting as, like, water filters, right? If they're fungus, they're pulling dead and decaying nutrients out of the water to help filter it for the facility above them. Could be, too. Or it could be none of those. I mean, I could be totally wrong on that one, too. Not quite sure exactly what the point of those is, but those are a couple theories of mine. The other thing is that anti-gravity water. That's a little weird. There are a couple locations that involve manipulating the water level above you. Now, it could just be, like, functional science in keeping the creatures suspended and upside down while offering a path to reach those batteries. Maybe. But that's kind of strange, and I don't know how it's connected to the rest of the story. But it's an interesting mechanic nonetheless. Regardless, as you approach the main structure, right, clearly the epicenter of the facility, you get to that window and you see outside, in a distance, you see a commotion of people running to it. And it's just at the beginning, right? You're not even into the lab yet. But there's this flurry of excitement, and it likely is because that meatball is undulating in some crazy anticipation of release of its captivity. So the masses flood to the viewing window to watch what's about to ensue. At this point, no one cares that the boy's presence is there. I mean, the scientists are more interested in what has the meatball all riled up. And so the boy finds his way into the containment orb, and the full-on WTF moment begins. Okay. I remember when I first played this part and thought, okay, here we go. The boy has his meat shield, and we're busting out of this place. And when I finally did reach the end, I was ultimately disappointed. Like, wait a minute, what just happened? Is it just going to lay there? Is that boy coming out of that thing? And that's when I took to the internet for some discussion. So there's one main thing that didn't sit well with me. So despite all the chaos and destruction I was causing, there were still people helping me. Why? Why did all these people help me? I mean, then I watched Max's video, and it became clear to me. The key is the diorama. And I noticed it when I fell on top of it, that it represented the hillside I rolled down on the beach. But what I overlooked was that spotlight shining on the exact spot my blob would reside at the end. It's like the facility knew I was going to end up there, and that's when it clicked. Remember those flooded facilities I mentioned earlier? There were two instances. First, when we stole the submersible, and the second was that more modern one where you, quote-unquote, died. I believe this blob escape plan has occurred at least 2 other times, and probably more. And to be honest, I believe that the meatball actually started as one person, and in an effort to escape, it continues to absorb drones, become bigger and stronger, and ultimately become the 40-person blob that we see in this game. It may have even started as that one little girl swimming around in the water and having absorbed all these other people who have come to save it. But during at least 2 of those escapes, the facility was irreparably damaged and ultimately flooded. I mean, the new facility then is simply built on top of the old one, and they just include other countermeasures to help corral the meatball to where they want it to go in an effort to keep testing it and the drones going. So that's why they start pushing you in a certain direction. I mean, the first guy opens that keycard door for you, and then another guy opens a hatch that you go down into just so you can get underneath into that little garbage chute. And then when you're down there, there's a guy who actually hooks that like gondola crane thing that you're swinging on for you to pull down that wall. And then finally, when you're in that wall, there's that guy who cranks up that box for you. So, you throw the box up top, he turns it on, and it opens a gate for you. So at first I thought, wow, are these guys sympathetic to the blob's escape, They didn't like all the testing we were doing, and they wanted to see me escape. And then it was kind of curious that I ended up in that dark room with that spotlight over a circle and a dangling box like a fishing lure. And if you look in the background, you can even see legs, lab coats, and clipboards of the people in the shadows that come to look when they spring the trap on you. This building has been setting up a containment vessels based on your inevitable escape. It knows you're leaving. And so those people helping? Hardly. They're just trying to get you to that containment trap without getting squashed themselves, like the foreman, if you move through the door fast enough. But, like the movie The Truman Show, the facility wants you to believe you've escaped. The notion that you've attained freedom. But ultimately, what happens at the end of the credits, with the boy, you're done, and the blob is laying there on the sand, what happens? The boy slides down the rock hill, and the game starts over. You haven't won anything. The facility will go down to the beach, scoop you up, and put you in a new containment sphere, now one boy bigger. Okay, but so what about the secret ending? Well, those nodes, I believe they're amplifiers or power cells. I think they're probably power cells, right? They got those long yellow extension cords. And they are preventing the lock on the bunker door to be opened through some sort of master control orb that's just beyond the blob's containment cell. Once you break all those chains, the bunker can be accessed, and the secret ending is found. And in the background of that bunker, of the secret ending, is another computer with a mind control device on it. And the only action of the boy is to pull the plug and shut it down. But once he powers that thing off, he immediately collapses into the position of a non-controlled drone, like we've countered earlier in the game. You see, the game inside is not about the boy at all. He's simply a vessel to save the meatball. The blob uses this avatar to come save it and then assimilate it to become more powerful and escape. But it realizes that the escapes cannot happen, and it's just this fool's errand. So its only recourse is to shut down the whole program, pull the plug, sacrifice itself. My favorite line from the YouTube video, and I think it fits so well, much like Joshua did in the movie War Games, the only winning move in the struggle for control is to not play. And so ultimately that's what the boy does. He, as the vessel, pulls the plug on the blob, shutting down the whole program. Again, just my take on the whole game. I loved this game, and I loved where it sent my brain. I still think about it now. It is so much fun. If you didn't share these thoughts and want to talk to me about it, I would love to hear your theories as well. You can blow up my fungus theory. You can destroy my consecutive escapes blob theory. I'd love to hear it because I think this game is so deep and so fascinating that I could continue to replay it in my head and come up with different thoughts and stories. And like I said, even during this, there are lots of things I don't know. And so I'm very curious on other people's takes. But two key points that I think are most prevalent is that I haven't really heard a lot of internet theories on, and you could either back me up or counteract me, is the multiple escape angle and the absorbing blob continuing to grow angle. I feel pretty strongly about those. And so, like, to hear, I think Major Nelson had a nightmare angle. Don't buy it. Even you know, a lot of similarities between Max's YouTube video. There are other people who think there's tons of different versions out there. But that's mine. I hope you enjoyed it. I really liked this game a lot, and I would love to hear your thoughts. So leave some comments on the forums, discourse.zed2zed.com, or you can always direct message me on our Discord chat windows. I would love to hear about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the game as much as I did. I hope you guys enjoyed this show as much as I did. I wrote a whole big script for this because I was excited to read it and to be excited to tell you about my story and my feelings on it. So, with that being said, I'm going to sign off. And so this has been Brandon. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed yourself. We will catch you on the forums, on the podcast, or on a boosting session. We'll see you guys later. Have a good one. Bye.